next guest has sold over 20 million albums. He's got 2 radio shows, a television show, and he's about to release his 13th CD. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Brian McKnight to the Brian McKnight Show. Brian, first of all, thank you so much for allowing us into your home this evening.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you all here at my house. Mi casa, su casa, literally. I love your show, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much, man. Listen, after 20 years in the business, what's your motivation for continuing to write music?
You know, what's interesting is that since I was 18, I've been a professional writer, and there hasn't been a day that's gone by where there weren't 3 or 4 works in progress going through my head, and I would write every day. About a year and a half ago, I got kind of burnt out, and I decided that I was just going to take a year off. I wasn't going to write one song. And then I decided to make another CD. And the only fear I had from stopping was that I was a little afraid that it would be tough to turn it back on again. And it was. At first, you know, it was like a trickle. There would be a little bit of a song here or there. Then all of a sudden I realized that there were so many experiences that I had had that I hadn't written about, that I had filed away, that eventually just started coming back and coming back. And then it came song after song after song. And what you realize is that there's so many experiences that I had to pull from since I took that time off. It almost became new, like I hadn't written anything before. So the 2 things we all have in common is that we want to love someone and we want to be loved back exactly the same way. And I don't think you can ever stop writing about that subject.
But here's something. How does it feel to know that somewhere in the world right now, someone could be making love to your music?
One of the craziest things that ever happens is that I could be walking anywhere, and it could be a guy and his girl, whoever, and they're like, you know, when we made our babies to you, and they say you're responsible for, you know, my son or my daughter, the case may be. I think that what would be the point of writing this music if there wasn't somebody right now proposing using the music, if they weren't somewhere making love to that music right now? I think that's really one of the reasons why I do it, that people can actually use my words and my melodies to be the soundtrack of their lives.
Are you really the man in the music that you write about?
Am I the man in the music that I write about? I think that at this point in my life, I would hope and strive to try to be that man. I think the hardest thing in the world is that I write this music, and then I think women sometimes think that I'm the most sensitive, most caring man in the world, and I'm really not. But I try to be that as much as I can, but I don't think anybody can really live up to being that person. I think that's part of the fantasy, and I think that's the part that gets me in trouble most of the time.
And you know, I know exactly how you feel, but that must cause problems in your actual relationships.
Does it cause? It causes major problems in every relationship, because I think people, especially women, most of the time, they have an idea of the man they want. And then you have this guy writing all these love songs and then you expect him to be that way, me. But I think, this is what I say. I say, listen, I don't think you want that guy 24 hours a day. I think you want a regular guy who's into sports, who's into all the things that regular guys are into, who can go there when he has to, when he needs to. I think that's me.
I'm going to switch gears for a moment, talk about songs. What's the real story behind the song Anytime?
Wow. If you listen to the lyrics in Anytime, and this is a great question because nobody's really asked me that. People think and have their own assumptions about how I write. The first half of that song was a song about how on my first album I got all these fans and people loved what I did, and then my second album I made a very musical album, and I felt like I lost some of the people that I got in the first time. And I was like, well, don't you remember me? What happened to the way that it was? And I thought I was getting too deep about the philosophical aspects of that. So then the second verse I decided, well, why don't I put this in a language that's more about love so people don't think that I've gone off on some tangent. So if you really listen to the words, from the first verse and the second verse, it's almost 2 different songs, but nobody ever really asked me that. That was actually a pretty good question.
Now let's talk about the song Back at One. Does that song have a special story?
Back at One's a very interesting story because most people think that the title of that song is Back to One. Yeah. Because Back to One seems to make more sense. Back at One. I was actually sitting in this house. My media room is right over there. And when I first built this place and we were putting all this stuff together, I was reading a manual. Now, if you look at any electronics manual out there, if you're having a problem with it, what happens is that you look at the troubleshooting page, and the troubleshooting page says, you know, do step 1, step 2, and step 3. If the problem persists, do this, and then repeat steps 1, 2, and 3.
That's true.
And I said to myself, wow, that would be a great sort of outline for a song. And then the pieces started to fit. And then I wrote that song in about 5 minutes after that, and it's the biggest hit that I've ever had.
Yeah, you know what, I heard that it was like a DVD manual or something like that. That's crazy. Now, the title of your new CD is The Evolution of a Man. What's that all about?
You know, it goes back to what I said earlier. After taking that year off from songwriting and having so many different things happen, I mean, I turned 40. I have a son about to turn 20. There's so many different things. You know, I was married from 20 to 32, so I didn't really have a chance to live my 20s. So I lived my 20s and my 30s, and I think now, you know, things I thought that I would never do, like think about marriage again, think about, you know, kids again, think about, you know, being with one special somebody for the rest of my life. I think I've finally come around to that kind of thinking, which I never thought that I would. And if you listen to the songs on this CD, you'll hear an underlying theme to all of that. There really is no sad song on this record. There's really no, you know, there's usually that sort of both sides of me that says, okay, I can be happy here, but there's always this sadness. So I think that I've evolved. I've evolved into, at least I'm trying to evolve into the kind of man that I can be proud of being, which I haven't been in a while.
Can't wait for that. Now, I also hear that your two sons, BJ and Nico, were an integral part of making this CD.
It's interesting. For the first time in my career, I didn't go to a studio to make this CD. I actually built a studio in the house. It's actually right above us, right here. And my two sons have become an integral part of the record-making process because they're making their very first CD at the same time I'm making my 13th. So my oldest son, BJ, engineered most of this record. Nico played on the guitar, on his guitar on the CD. And just having them in the house, because they have the benefit of knowing all the music that I've listened to and that I've made, but also they really listen to all the music of today. So this is probably the most produced record that I've ever made, because I've had two resident geniuses who know everything in the world about today's music and the history of music, to sort of bounce ideas off of them and see their take on things. So they worked hand in hand with me on making a record that I thought had the same songwriting process of all the records that I've made, but had a, you know, I went kicking and screaming into the 21st century, the technology. Now, usually it's just me, a guitar player, a bass player, and a drummer, and we just make music. This time, you know, I went with the technology that was available. And again, this is probably the most modern record that I've ever made.
Thanks so much, Brian, for having us. You're going to stick around, though, to sing your brand new single, right?
Of course I will stick around. I think this time we're going to do it unplugged with my two sons singing along with me, so I can't wait.
Brian's new CD, The Evolution of a Man, is in stores October 27th.
And